pharmacists and doctors and things like that. That's a response. And some who think one day they can sing Emilokan, they will say, okay, don't let them sabotage their own future through getting involved in what is not their business. I don't know whether you watch the Sauni Taxiegba. It's a comedy skit in which it tries to overcome challenges, but at the end of the day, it lands in greater trouble. And that comedy skit at the Sauni Taxiegba represents what the majority of the Nigerian population are also facing. And that segment, the professor's segment, you know, the professors don't have the privileges of pastors that can collect tithes and seed and offerings from people. So they don't have that kind of opportunities. So that they have to operate within the context of that which is possible. But they understand the contradictions very well.
Prof, let me ask you, how can Nigeria and other African nations strike a balance between preserving cultural heritage and adapting to the demands of a rapidly changing political landscape?
It's possible, but it has to be consciously done. So, if you create a culture void, you're in trouble. Yeah. Because you don't want a culture void. If you don't have a clearly defined cultural parameters, we cannot speak to issues of developmental aspirations. And I will use food, for instance. So today, Indomie. Because instead of promoting the culture of Akara and Ogi, you switch to Indomie. And that Indomie, they remove the shaft where the nutrients are concentrated and use them to feed animals. And then they leave you with the starch. Part of what culture does is to say, this is the food of your own people. This is the language of your own people. We now have in Lagos here Yoruba people who cannot speak Yoruba. That you say. But if they cannot speak their own language, when they're making development choices, they will become Western choices that they will make in music, in food, in clothes, in mannerism. That is a dangerous slope. You don't want that. I'm not saying we're not going to be static and not borrow ideas. When you borrow ideas, it is your own cultural grounding that you use to edit it. It allows you to say, this is what you don't want from that which is coming from abroad. And this is how you are going to fight those things that are going to destroy you. So if you visit New York or California, you can be shocked about the clothes people dress. The definition of the breast now is just nipples. They show you two-thirds of it, and they will say, well, those are not breasts. That is just flesh. Well, it's the culture, your own cultural grounding, that will say, we want to wear Western clothes, but we are not going to accept many of these things we don't want. Issues around sexuality, issues around polygamy, issues around power, they're all culturally grounded.
Shape the future of governance in Africa. For example, in recent times, we've seen coups in various countries in the sub-Saharan continent. What are your perspectives on this?
Thank you very much. First, lack of good governance. Yeah. So, if democracy does not lead to development, there will be crisis because your citizens will not care about that democracy. So, second, there are many cases in which the presidents don't want to go. Cameroon, one family was ruling Gabon for 53 years. Sisi just won another election in Egypt. Anybody who is in his 40s in Cameroon, the only president is seen is Biya. Yeah. So That is a major crisis. Third, your population is basically youthful. And you're asking elderly people to be managing them. That's a very big disconnect in which they're having divergent conversations, different ideas of development. When TINUBU was campaigning, was saying, "But you are too old." He said he's a young person. So that's another crisis. We're not promoting the association of our people. We're promoting the associations of politicians. Take ECOWAS for people. It's not a parliament of people. It is presidents who send their friends to represent their countries. So, and if your friends represent your countries in ECOWAS and African Union, they are not going to make major changes that will be of significant effect. Then in all of them, there's rising poverty. And in the Sahel, there is the strong extraordinary hands of France. So they are passing through a second decolonization because they obtained their independence, but France did not let go. So they need to complete that process of decolonization, which we are witnessing in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So on one hand, it's surprising that a country like Nigeria will not read all these things clearly. And as some of us told them, the TINUBU government, Niger is more important to Nigeria than ECOWAS. They share borders with almost 6 states. They are basically young people. 70% of Niger is Hausa people. They allow you to, the River Niger passes through them. And you want to sell gas to Europe. If you want to sell gas to Europe, where is your pipeline going to pass? You have to go through Niger. You can't on the one hand be saying you're signing contract with Germany for gas. I'll be fighting Niger where the gas line or pipeline will pass through. So all these contradictions are there. But the political spaces have been radicalized thanks to social media. The information age is spreading rapidly all these transgressions that politicians are doing. They have no place to hide. And there's a limit to which they can keep using violence and force. The use of that violence and force will begin to create problems for themselves, because the more of those strategies they use, the more they're also inviting the military to take over power.
Are there specific examples from other regions, countries, that you believe countries in Africa can draw inspiration from in terms of political reforms?
Well, some people will argue that some small countries are doing better. They point to Rwanda. Sometimes they point to Botswana. I was there last August. I was in Gaborone. Sometimes, until the financial crisis in Ghana, everybody was using Ghana as a good example. South Africa is in a mess because of xenophobia, the decaying infrastructure, the black on black violence, they're still there. Hopefully, if countries like Algeria, like Kenya, like Nigeria do better, they would provide the opportunities for many other countries in different regions to also transform themselves.
Let me also get your perspective on this. In one of your recent pieces, which you wrote, you talked about the fallouts of government's failure to tackle corruption becoming uncontrollable. Part of what you prefer as solutions to the problem of malfeasance is to reduce the monetary attraction of public office holders. How do you mean by that?
Well, I've also argued that corruption can be privatized, in which the current democratization of poverty, whereby everyone has an access to corruption, is not working. That why don't you develop a corporate elite? If you get a contract, they will do it very well, make their own profit, which they're entitled to as entrepreneurs. And maybe if the number can be reduced, because as the stage in which we are, we cannot be talking about the elimination of corruption. Because the people who are in power, that is part of the process. It's the recycling of state money. They steal from the state to run for elections. So those are not going to be party to this conversation. And at the bottom level, I'm very hopeful that a generation will come and say enough. Maybe because of suffering, maybe they see no end to this crisis. And the rise of the conservatives in Europe and the US, France took a decision yesterday. It's through a majority landslide vote that they want to reduce the number of immigrants coming to their country. So steps like that may wake us up. They may wake us up, hopefully, and people will begin to rethink how they will bring some of these issues around values back to the table.
Finally, Prof, as the Jacob and Francis Sanga Musical Chair in the Humanities, how do you see the humanities contributing to a better understanding of contemporary political issues in Nigeria and Africa as a whole?
So that is what humanities basically do every day. That's what they do. Because they study societies, the institutions, the sociology, the economics, the politics, it's anthropology. And they come up with the ideas of how changes can be produced. That's what they do, basically. You can find many lawyers in politics, but you're not going to find many engineers in politics. You're not going to find many doctors in politics. So you find how some occupations are actually cut out of. Some are well suited for these conversations, and some they are aloof from this conversation. The humanities is at the very center of this conversation, not just in Nigeria, but everywhere in the world.
So finally, what's, in your opinion, could form a basis for a reform in terms of producing ethical leadership in Nigeria and confronting the hydra-headed issues and challenges that the country is facing at this time?
Well, in many societies, they passed through what we call revolution. Some have passed through reforms. But in our own case, you know, we have one of the highest number of churches in the world, mosques in the world, pastors in the world. So there is religion, but there is no God and commitment to God. We have resources, but they're badly used.
Yeah.
We have land, but we are not generating enough food. We have people, but we are not developing one capacity. So we are bundles of contradictions, in which on the left side of the balance sheet, we have many good things. But on the right side, the outcomes are negative. But in making my closing statement, let me do so in two ways, with a warning and with the expression of hope. In that warning, I don't want to frighten people, but maybe the problems of the countries are yet to begin. Because in 25 years' time, the Nigerian population will double. Current projection is that it's going to reach 400 million people. That 400 million people, they have to be fed. But we are not laying the agricultural foundation to feed them. They have to go to the school. We don't have the plan to create the schools that they can go to. We are allowing the number of Amejiri to keep increasing, which is very unfortunate. In one projection done last year, the amount of money to remove the Amejiri off the street is more than the national revenue of Nigeria. It's as bad as that. And then we are reproducing poverty. And in that reproduction of poverty, the current figure of 130 million people, if we are not careful, is going to double. That will escalate violence. You cannot contract development to the streets and asking the military and the police to be taking care of kidnappers and armed robbers and area boys. It's not going to work. What you have to do more effectively is to have a means and a system that will allow people access to food, good drinking water, basic health facilities, and neighborhood schools that their kids can go to. Without doing those minimum, I think we are laying a greater foundation for a greater crisis. But hope is there, because Nigeria is full of intelligent people, highly skilled people, energetic young men and women, land, mass, mineral resources, whether it's gold or lead, lithium, and so many things. How we have to put those resources to use and transform the nation, and our ability to do so effectively is what will change this narrative from bad to good. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this interview a lot.
We really appreciate it, and thank you so much for insightful analysis, sir.
Thank you.